There's another one.
So, dude, I pulled in.
But it was amazing.
Right? Pulled into the gate.
Yeah.
And it's right next to the studio. And basically what they were saying is what the actors or actresses used to do is they'd go, work their set. And they're used to like just be like a gate you could walk through onto the club. And then they'd be at the club. They'd play golf.
Sick.
And it was kind of like, went hand in hand.
Right.
And
no, it is. It totally is.
It was sick, dude. It was super sick.
Yeah.
So you walk into like the men's locker room, right?
Yeah.
You get through the locker room, and in the locker room, basically, there's a full bar. There's a whole lounge area. There's a humidor. There's a cigar area, right? And then it's all of these like stars, like Hollywood stars, old school though.
Yeah.
On the walls.
Yeah.
It was a vibe, man. It was
That's
like a
awesome.
super cool vibe.
That's super cool.
Yeah, so I went and golfed, and I exploded. Right, so check this out. So I went with Sean Malto and maybe the Doja Cat's manager, or somebody's managing maybe her tour or something like that.
Yeah.
And then this guy Jordan Rogers, big like marketing guy, and then me, right? And I had never met two of the guys we were playing with.
Yeah.
And Sean Malto likes to bet.
Yeah.
Right, so he's asking everybody's handicaps.
Okay.
And my handicap's high right now.
Okay.
Right? It's like 15.
Okay.
It used to be like 8.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
so-
right. I remember the people I've talked to that have played with you are like, oh, this guy sucks. He just started and he's like killing everybody. So
That's how I started.
Good.
How I started golf.
Yeah.
Just started.
Just
I was
killed it.
obsessed. I'm
Yeah.
competitive, and I was beating everybody.
Right.
Like dipped into my 80s in like the first like 4 months of playing. Like I was
Yeah.
on a mission.
Yeah.
I've been trending in the wrong direction for a while. Okay. So they want to bet, and so they get everybody's handicaps.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm high right now. I'm a 15, right? And they're like, okay. First hole, I destroy the drive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I play this like big, like buttery draw. I nuked it,
Yeah.
right? So I'm 30 yards past everybody.
They're like, okay,
right?
sandbagger.
Right? And then the approach shot, I put it like 6 feet from the hole.
Oh, no.
Right? And I
Yeah.
barely missed the birdie putt.
Yeah.
And seriously, everybody's looking at me like, that's not a 15
Sure, buddy.
handicap,
Yeah.
right? And then I double number 2, double number 3, bogey, and I just freaking went on a run of bogeys.
Okay.
I finished with like a 95.
Okay.
And they were like, hey, man, at the beginning, we thought you were sandbagging, but like you're a legit 15, but your swing is not.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I experienced.
Okay.
So what's going on? You been golfing?
I like it. No, it's been a tragedy. Yeah, no, we had holidays and then we got back and it was just like life and, dude, it's just busy trying to get back. Because we've got soccer.
Right.
Both boys are on all-star team. Both boys, they're on the same soccer team, is actually also going to Bakersfield to play like area finals.
Right.
Navy's on a team that's doing the same thing. And then Ford just started baseball yesterday.
Jeez.
Hudson and Ford are both doing surf. So it's just like full.
So do you do any more acting? Like you did was General Hospital the last like show that you really, were on, and then you moved into the more of the voice stuff?
Kind of, but I definitely have done things off and on. So I've done.
So acting is still at play.
It's still at play. Like I don't have an active agent or manager in the on-camera theatrical world. I have a commercial agent.
Okay.
So I still have somebody that's in that world. So anything could pop up. And anytime somebody calls and says, hey, we want Chad for a thing, like General Hospital called me back and said, hey, we want you to come back and do an episode, they just found me. They found my agents. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so
I'm not hardcore pursuing it, but, anything can happen.
Okay, so walk me through that. Your career started, and it was, how did you just describe it? On camera?
Yeah.
Is that what you?
So there's on-camera theatrical, which is like movies, television, acting, and then there's like commercials, also on camera, obviously, but it's the like, hi, I'd like a, credit card, blah, 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 whatever, that kind of thing.
And so you have agents that focus on each category.
That's right.
Right? So don't put a lot of attention towards the on-camera theatrics like movies, TV shows.
Right.
But you are doing stuff still in commercials.
Yeah, still, it's just kind of like whatever shows up. But voiceover is really, in the entertainment side is still a huge portion of what I do.
Okay, so right now for the voice stuff.
Yeah.
CBS
CBS.
and history.
Not history right now. CBS and Paramount Plus are kind of the two big things that I'm doing. So tons of stuff that's going to run on the Super Bowl. I've got a session right after this that I'm going to do. They called me and actually they were like, hey, we need you at 10:30. And I was like, hey, I'm doing a thing. So they were like, all right, we'll do it afterwards. So I have my stuff. I'll either go to my studio or I can do it in my car,
Right.
which is pretty cool.
How do you get into that? Like somebody listening is like, you know what? I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, how do I get started?
Sure. So I had a background in acting, obviously. So I moved to LA and moved to Hollywood in 1999 to pursue the dream of acting. I had done a little bit back in Texas and immediately just struck gold and immediately just started working. And so I ended up with like 5 guest star spots in the first year, ended up on a TV show within the first year, and just started working. And so just had a career just drop in my lap and just started hustling and working hard and just pushed hard. So then after being on General Hospital that was the show I was on for 4 years, then all of a sudden I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And so I had a friend around that time who said, hey, you should think about doing voiceover. And I was like, don't know what that is. So tell me about it. I mean, I always thought it'd be fun to be like a Disney voice someday, to be like a prince and, Aladdin or something like that, right? But then I didn't know what that was. And so he said, listen, you're coming over to my house on Tuesday. We're going to record a demo, and then we're going to send it to my agents, and I think they're going to like you. And I was like, okay. He was like, I think you got a great voice, and you've got this talent in acting. So I went over to his house, recorded a demo, sent it to the agents, and they said, we're screaming to sign this guy. And within a week, within 6 months, I was making as much as I was on General Hospital.
Dang.
So it just instantly happened. So then I was, again, career just dropped in my lap, but then I just started hustling hard. So I started going, okay, what classes do I need to take? What demos do I need to do? What website do I need to create? So, I think it's always one of those things. I think voiceover, you become successful in 2 different worlds. I think it's got a little bit of acting because you've got to have a perspective, but it's also got a section of music to it. So I think you have to learn how to fit within other people speaking. It has to be fit within a 60-second spot or a 30-second spot or a 15-second commercial, right? So you have to figure out how to say these cool-sounding things timed, right?
So you can sing as well?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hey, we have a friend, Paul Rodriguez is his name. He's basically like he'd be the Tiger Woods or like the Kelly Slater of skating.
Okay.
Like he's the GOAT. His dad is the comedian Paul Rodriguez, and he's always been into acting.
Yeah.
And he gets in these cycles where he's doing a lot of acting classes.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the normal process? Like you have to learn the skill and then maintain the skill, and then it's just an agent selling you? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, I would say that. I think of it. It's, and I think in the business they call it, like honing your chops. You know what I mean? It's like talking about golf. It's like you're only going to get better at golf and stay consistently good at golf if you're golfing.
Right.
But I think so. I think in the beginning, especially, it really is about making sure that you have an ownership, that when somebody hands you a script, that you're going to know exactly what to do.
Right.
It's practice, it's rehearsed, because you get on a set and there's lights and there's microphones and there's all these kind of things. You get nervous, right? So you have to have some sort of skill set to fall back on that's going to allow you to create the story and the emotion and the reality and the relaxation that makes you watch movies and love them.
Right.
And make it feel like, oh, that's my buddy, right?
Right.
So you have to have all of that technique there so it doesn't look like you have any technique at all.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so how have you found that talent to act, do you apply that in real life at all? Have you applied it in other business? How could that be valuable outside of you filming movies?
Sure. Yeah. I think a background in acting, I think, is extremely valuable. As a matter of fact, I would always suggest it for anybody that wants to do anything. As a matter of fact, we used to have guys that would come into our acting classes. They were like, I just want to be a better businessman. I want to be, a producer maybe someday. And so I want to learn that side of it. But I think it's the ability to connect with people, first and foremost. So I think what makes actors and movie stars that we know and love successful is because they tell the truth. And so they have the ability to get a script and figure out some way that whatever their suspension of disbelief is in their heart and in their mind that connects to that truth of that character, then they figure out how to tell that on screen. That's the thing that makes it feel like, oh, dude, I've been there before. Right. Or it makes you go, dude, is that what life is like?
Right.
That's crazy. But there's some sense in which there's just a connection to that truth. So that translates into business that you go, man, if I'm sitting across the, desk from somebody and I'm trying to make a deal, it's like, well, I'm trying to connect with a real person.
Right.
Right? If I'm trying to connect with an employee that's got an issue going on, well, I'm just trying to connect with a real person. So it's trying to find the truth of what that is. And even when you're thinking through some sort of business concept, it's like, just think like a human thinks. Don't overthink all of these things.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the practical application of just being able to like stand up and speak in front of people and, figure out how to connect, right? And be charming or whatever, or stand up and say, hey, guys, I'm here to talk about a thing, whatever. So, absolutely.
So when, like, if you were to look at like the actors or actresses in the industry, are they similar to like athletes in a sense? Like, do you have a portion of them that are more business savvy? Like, you're very business savvy. Do you have others that like just focus on their skill and nothing else? Are there some that like are good in investing? Like, how does that ramp out? Because when you look at like pro athletes, typically how it is, there's the outliers that are business savvy.
Right.
There's probably a larger percentage that know that they have an opportunity in front of them that they can capture, so they put people in place to help them. And then you probably have the majority that just like, hey, this is the moment, and then it ends, and then they're doomed, right?
Yeah.
Is there any crossover or any similarity with actors and actresses and athletes in that regard?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I feel like sometimes there's actors like let's take somebody like Mark Wahlberg, right? Extremely successful in all the above. He's now started multiple businesses. He's just super successful. But he's been able to translate from the beginning of being like a model to a rapper to then being an actor to then starting like a clothing company and, nutrition. I mean, like multi-hyphenate, right? In so many different areas. And it really comes down to discipline for a guy like that, right? And so then he's taking, I don't know him at all, but when you look at that, there's like this consistency of a connection to like a discipline that he takes all the way into all of those different arenas. So I think it is that there's some sense in which you have your mind working on two levels, because if you do understand, it's not just show. It's called show business, right? So if you're aware and you're awake, you understand that like there's something that's being sold here and somebody's making money off of this thing, right? There's producers, there's, the studio, and so if you're wise and you go, well, what is it that's marketable about me or about this product? I'm just a product. It's Robert Downey Jr. always jokes that it's like, I'm just selling soap, because that's what it was back in the day, right? It was just these, these TV shows, and then some actor would pull out their thing and they'd be like, such and such soap, like, so it really is that. And it's just translated to a more sophisticated version of that. So if you can understand that and figure out how to capitalize that, then you win.
That's a good outlook.
Yeah.
So, okay, talking about disciplines and, building business, you guys have a very large clothing brand.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you two questions. Let's start with this one. What are some of your disciplines? Like if you were to look at like, your box right now, and things that you're doing and you will not kind of paint outside of the lines are like, what are some of those fundamentals that allow you to act on commercials, do all the voiceover, help with the business, be a good husband, be a good dad? You've got a lot going on, right?
That sounds overwhelming when you say it.
There's a lot, man. Like, but look, in my perspective, like in the times where I feel like I'm doing it well, it comes down to discipline, and in some regard, delegation. Like having people around you to help. When all of that is functioning well, I feel like I'm able to, handle a lot. And the times where like I'm freaking loose and there's no discipline and I'm a little bit of a wreck, I'm usually not able to. So like for you, you're in a time where you guys are doing a lot. Right? And you're doing a lot well. I think that's probably the better way to say it.
Sweet. Thank you.
How? Right? Yeah. Like what are some of these things that you are just, it's this no matter what?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it comes down for me to have my priorities right. That everything's in alignment for what's the most important things in my life. And if I'm satisfying those areas first, everything else is going to fall into place. And I think it also comes down to understanding what your giftedness is and then building a team to help you in the rest of the areas. And so ultimately, at some point in the beginning of a business or in the beginning of a career, you're it. You're all of it. You can't afford anybody else. You're the only one who even knows how to do it. You barely know what you're doing. You're just like going off of, sheer will and gut, and then things start happening if you're talented or, you're just graced with success, right? And then then you start going, okay, well, if I focus on this area, then I could find somebody else that actually might be even better at me than this. And that's where I think the beginning is a helpful question, is to find, is there somebody else that's on my team, or if I could hire somebody else that's even better at me than this, then I should hire them all day long.
Right.
And then I'll be able to zero in even more of my pie of time that I have into this other thing that I'm really, really great at. And so I think it's a lot of that. It's understanding that, through discipline comes freedom. So it's through creating a structure in your schedule, even in your family, and a lot of times, and in your business, that you create some sort of structure and then go, okay, now how do I find some freedom? Or that builds out your freedom, where okay, now I can go focus on working on these other areas. So I'd say that's been a big part of it. The other part of it is really having a great team. I think you spoke to that, and I think that's it. It's once you find other people that can help you, you can't do anything by yourself. You really can't, not in a long way.
Right.
And so by finding a great team around you, you can go really far.
Right. When you guys started, you want to give a plug real quick, the brand?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Carly Jean Los Angeles. Okay. Absolutely.
When you guys started the brand,
Yeah.
It was basically just you and Carly, like out of the house, right?
Yeah, well, it actually started in 2004 with Carly before I even knew her. So she had a
I didn't know
store.
that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So she had a brick and mortar shop in Burbank on Magnolia, just like really cool. And by the time I met her, she had actually grown from that small shop to a second shop that was even bigger, because there was even more people that were coming. And then when we met in 2005, then I helped her even grow it before and during our getting married. We got married in 2006 to another bigger shop. And so she had a couple of employees. And then when we first got married, I started helping kind of manage those employees and kind of helping think through them and kind of vision for the business. And then we kind of grew that for a while. And my voiceover business started being successful. And I was like, we had 2 kids. And I said, hey, this family thing's big, and this, I got this stuff going on. Why don't we close the store down for a season? And it was, I think, kind of hard for her, because she's extremely creative and extremely talented.
She's a people person and an extrovert. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big time.
When you're
It just
around her, you feel
thrives off that,
yep,
right?
Yep. Yeah, so she's talented at it.
She's really talented at it and really special and gifted. And so then we were like, well, but you can always come back to it. And so we pushed pause on it for a season. I actually went back and finished my degree in organizational management, and was like, maybe this will help me do some other kind of business, or maybe producing or whatever. And then in 2015, we decided to launch the store again, because I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing a business. What should I do? And she was like, well, I think we should do the store again. And I was like, okay, not a brick and mortar, let's do it online.
Got it.
And so she was like, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I was like, I got you. Like, you do the stuff that you're magical at, and I'll do the rest. I'll do the online stuff. I'll do the business. I'll do the people. I'll do all the stuff, the logistics, the financial backing. And so that's what happened. So it kind of started in 2015 and then really exploded in 2018.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so how big was it when it was brick and mortar? Like, how many employees do you think?
In the very beginning, it was just her. And then I think when we closed it down, I think we had 2 employees.
2 employees.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you guys close it at what year?
It was like 2006 or 8. I can't remember exactly.
Oh, so you took a pause for a amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I get asked a lot, and I want you to answer this, because I think it's really important. When you start a company, it's just you.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really hard to actually get out of the solopreneur kind of aspect of it, where, yeah, you're doing it all, but you're keeping all the money, right? And what we know is the only way to actually build a business that has any type of scale to it, or ultimately you don't have to be a slave to, you have to build a team, right? So the question to you is going to be twofold. One, did you guys have enough capital to invest into the business to then hire the employees? Or did you guys have to wait, or did you choose to wait until enough revenue came in to the business to then hire people?
Yeah, we were pouring most in the beginning back into the business.
Okay, so
very much back into inventory, into infrastructure. And again, like in the beginning, you're like, nobody else gets it like I do, right? And same with Carly. Like, she's got just an insane talent for the product and the way to communicate the product, and margins, and like just the business side of it. Like, she's just got an insane talent for that. And so in the beginning, it was like, well, it's all us. And then we said, okay, I think we need to diversify and find some people. And it really became practical. It was like, well, we need somebody to come and like take some pictures, right? And then it was like, hey, what if we had somebody who came and like help pack some, pack and ship some orders, right? So it became practical. And then it just became like, wait, we got a lot of people coming to pack and ship orders. And then it became like, okay, we have a ton of people coming over. And at some point, we actually moved at our house. We moved all of the furniture out of our house into our backyard. And we had our entire house, our living room was covered in clothing racks.
Right.
And we had people showing up to pack and ship orders from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. And so we would have to run shifts, and we'd have to like delegate this one room in our house where people would pack and ship orders. And the warehouse, if you will, was our living room. So it was just wild. And then at some point, you're just going, dude, we got a lot of people here. We need to figure out how to manage this thing.
Right. Oh, that's interesting because the question I get a lot on social is more the income standpoint. Like, people go, look, I'm making $200,000 a year right now. I'm doing it all, but like, I don't want to hire somebody because that means I'm going to take the pay cut in the short term. And so I actually get stuck on this, just because that's the common question I get. Look, it'll be worth it if you take the pay cut for the season, because the amount of money you're going to make afterward on a team is going to be way more and less of your time, right? But you just brought up a point that actually is, it's something that I struggled with. Like when you get good at something, or maybe even the better way to say it is this: when you have your hands in everything, it actually can be challenging to pull them out because there's an element that feels like you're removing control. And I think it's easy for that to creep into your like insecurities as well, right? Like I'm bringing people up to succeed, and people are going to think that I'm not this great one or whatever you want to say. That comes into play. That totally comes into play. So that's interesting. You talking about scale though and hiring. We had a conversation a few weeks ago. And we were talking about hiring. And when you were talking, my wife and I were just glued to you. We're just like this. It was one of the coolest conversations. And so I actually want to bring that so that everybody can hear this. Can you explain how you go about hiring people? Because it's not easy to do. Like that's something that, and I'll start with this because when we were talking, you actually posed the question to me, like, how do you guys go about hiring? And for me, I don't think I'm that good at hiring. How our company works, either Jerry or Michael interviews somebody. And then if they make it to a second interview, then the third interview, I'll come in. And I'll kind of be like the final blessing. But honestly, like a lot of the people that they interview.
You're like the Pope. You come in and...
Well, it's interesting though, because there's a part of it where they're almost like testing if that person is going to be able to handle me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like our chief compliance officer is the last person we hired. And Michael and Jerry probably spent the majority of both meetings talking about me and how challenging I could be as somebody who has to manage compliance.
Sounds like they need to work on you,
right? But I mean, think about it, right? I do not come from our business is, I think, the most regulated business on the planet, right? The regulation is through the roof. That's not my background.
You're like, I'm a rule breaker.
You know what I'm saying? Like entrepreneur, that's what we do typically. You can't do that here. And so there's an element of our business that definitely feels like kind of like corporate America. Like it definitely in the beginning felt like I went from being an entrepreneur that builds things to, this is like what it feels like to just have a job working in a...
Hence the reason you have compliance.
That is challenging for me, right? And like, these guys see me often in the workplace. It can be...
Do tell. What's the real story?
What is it? It can be interesting, exciting, sloppy, uncomfortable. What, everything? It's fun. It's fun.
Good answer.
So what ends up happening is they end up like almost like, hey, are you going to be able to work with Mikey? But all that to say, I think it is very difficult to hire people because if you're hiring in good times, you don't know how they're gonna handle challenging times. Right. Talk about your process. How much time do you spend when you're interviewing, and how do you get to the point where you feel comfortable bringing somebody on?
Well, and to your point first, what you're talking about is culture.
Right.
So Mikey's part of the culture.
Right. You could say I set the tone.
It's also part of the magic sauce, right?
Yeah.
So in that same sense, my wife, Carly, is part of that same magic sauce. Right. And so you have to figure out what is it that makes your business move on? And what are the things that without it, your business is not going to function or is not going to excel or is not going to actually move it to the next space, right? And so that may be a person, that may be a way of being. It may be the way that your team functions. Maybe your team's really fast or like you're like, no, we're kind of slow and methodical. Well, whatever your culture is, you have to understand what that culture is and define it and go, I have to build a team that's going to either help that or that's going to stretch us to maybe grow in sophistication in those areas. Right. So I think that's the first thing. And that's not something to, I would say, I mean, maybe there's room for growth. There's always room for growth.
There always is. Look, there's improvement I can make always. I'm with you.
But it's definitely one of those things where it's important to look at what is and go, okay, we have to figure out how to help that, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. And so our structure of hiring is constantly evolving. And it's constantly evolving because our culture is constantly evolving. So we have to understand that, like, in the beginning, it was like, hey, it really was like, okay, who's going to be able to work with Carly? Who's going to be able to work with me? Who's going to be able to work with this, right? Well, then now it's like, well, who's going to be able to work with Allie or Jessica or, Jamie or like all these different gals on my team, and who's going to be able to function in the way that our photo shoots work or the way that right? So now I'm thinking through like, and we move really fast. And so you've got to be able to be like fast on your feet. And so I think it evolves over the course of time. And I think a lot of our process came in just a natural way because, as you know, a lot of times you make decisions in business based on success and pain.
Right.
And you go, okay, we ate it on that employee. That didn't feel good. How do we never let that happen again? Because we don't want to be a business that's known for that. Right. And I think it really started in the very beginning when we started thinking through how to build our culture. It was like, how do we care for our customers? That was it. It really came down to that. So how do we care for these people that have decided to put their money in our business? Man, that's special.
Right.
That's something that's really special. I see that as a gift. For me, a little bit of that is personal, that it started even from the acting world. I think that is something because we had, this from skating and from all sorts of stuff. You have fans and they come up to you and they're like, oh my gosh, like, that thing you did meant so much to me and it changed my life. And you're like, what?
Right.
How are you saying this? I'm just me. You know what I mean? I'm just Mikey. I'm just Chad. I'm just Carly, whatever it is. But it means something to them. And man, that's super special. And you have to just sit in a place of gratitude for that and say, okay, how do I serve those people? Right. Because they're giving of their time, they're giving of their money, they're giving of their lives to like encourage and support me. What? So I want to give back to that all day long. Right. So how do I care for them? So I want to build a team that's going to first and foremost care for those people. So then we started with like a vision for what our business is and what we want it to be and what are the values that we stand for. And so that's one of the first things that we do. We have a 4-step process of hiring where we go, first step is just a 15-minute interview, right? It's got like, I don't know, I think it's 6 or 7 questions on there. And, sometimes it's just like a gut like, I don't think this one's going to work. You know what I mean? So we started doing that on FaceTime. I think that actually started in 2020 when people weren't getting together as much. And we went, okay, yeah, 15 minutes. We can just find out a lot rather than saving an hour to an hour and a half of somebody and going, you're 15 minutes into an interview going, this is not going to work. Right. So I could have figured that out on 15-minute FaceTime. But you're looking for some things in the beginning of like, okay, like one of the questions we have in our first interview is, what was your job in high school? And you're like, okay, oftentimes we're hiring young people, right? So high school really wasn't that long ago. Well, sometimes the answer is, I didn't have a job. You're like, oh, interesting. Okay. So your work ethic didn't start then, so you might not have a work ethic yet. You might still be forming your work ethic of what it means to be hard, or maybe you're never going to get it, right? Or it's going to take another 10 or 15 years. Or you go, oh, like we have one gal on our team who was like, oh, I had a lawn business. I remember going, what? You had a lawn business? Yeah. I had a lawn business as a high school kid. And I was like, dude, this is incredible. Like, I'm so impressed. And I remember going, it literally was one of the reasons where I was like, this gal's sweet. She's really effective. She's really awesome. But that's the reason she's getting this job.
Yeah.
And then you have somebody else who's like, oh, I did sports. And you're like, okay, how'd you approach sports, right? So that's just one question that brings out more than just like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Right. So it kind of exposes some of that.
That's good.
So then our second question is our second interview is like an hour. You come in, we spend a little bit of time with people where it's more of a question of like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities for growth? We like to say it that way. And it's kind of talking through some of the things that would be in the job. And again, that's going to start to figure out who you're going to gravitate towards and if they're even interested in like your position. And we often ask somebody like, well, how did you hear about CJLA? And if you had to describe CJLA, Carly Jean Los Angeles to somebody, like, what would you say? So then you hear their perspective on your business and they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, somebody just told me to come over here and interview. You're like, okay, well, then you're not even into it that much. So this might not be a good fit for you. Right. Or somebody's like, oh my gosh, I love the way that you care for people. I love the product. Like, the clothing is amazing. I'm wearing it today, or whatever. And you go, okay, this person gets it. I think they're going to fit on our team. They're going to fit into our culture. And then our third is a vision and values interview. So it's just that. I sit down and I go, okay, this is a chance for us to really get to know each other. You might be great for this job, but what is your vision for your life? And what are the values that you hold most dear? And here's our vision for our business. And then I read them our latest, updated version of our vision. And it helps them to understand who our business is, where we're going, what to be able to expect from us, and what we expect from them. And then they kind of read that and go, man, that sounds like a lot. Or they go, that sounds exciting. And you're like, love it. And then we go, okay, and here's the values that we stand by and stand for. And so we kind of talk through those things. And I always say our goal is to be as honest as we possibly can, because this is a relationship. Like, business is more of a relationship than anything, right? You have relationships in work that's very similar to parenting or family or marriage or any of those kind of things. It really is that relational. So you want to understand those things as you move forward.
So that's 3.
So that's 3. Yeah.
Hit me with 4.
So 4 is our spousal interview.
That's the one. When you said this, I was tripping.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought this was genius.
Yeah. So our spousal interview is where they bring in either their spouse, right, significant other, or the closest person to them, their mom, their cousin, their best friend. And we sit them in the room together, and initially often you find out so much about the other person. You're like, oh, that's your significant other. Oh, that's who you chose to bring in with you. That says so much about you just in the beginning, right? And then we start asking questions, and my goal is always to ask the same question of both people. So I go, what are your strengths and what are your opportunities for growth? And you talk about the other person. Right. And as they talk about the other person, the person that's there is like, wait, you're asking the person that's trying to get this job what my strengths are? I'm not here for an interview. I'm not getting a job, right? But it helps you to understand about that person that you're interviewing, how they are in uncomfortable situations, how they talk about people in a challenging environment, and say something that might be hard to say about their mom or about their wife or about their husband. And then I ask them, like, if you could say there's one thing, mom, wife, that if you could let this go, if you could stop doing this, you would have so much more freedom in your life. Your life would be so much better. And they go, whoa, I got to think about that, right? And then it's a deep conversation, and it allows sometimes somebody to have a conversation that they've never had in an interview. And again, business sometimes is very uncomfortable. It's very challenging to like work through something, and so that's the goal, is to try and get them in that opportunity to navigate difficult conversations and talk about each other, right?
So good.
And so then at the end of it, it's always fun because it is kind of like relationship counseling, is that you go, well, I hope that you got to hear some encouragement to each other, and I hope you guys go out and have a fun lunch afterwards and talk about how cool you guys are and how cool this relationship is and what a blessing it is to know each other.
So do you ever see it on the flip side where it's like something was said that should not have been said, and you're like peeking out the window as they like walk out, and it's like, not good? Like
100%, 100%. Totally.
So you've seen it all.
Totally. You're like,
tears.
I can't believe that gal just said that to her mom. She's been wanting to say that since she was 13, right?
Dang, just like some breakthroughs. And
Absolutely.
Some just great. Wow.
Absolutely. And sweet moments of just encouragement. Like there was one gal we had on our team, and she was awesome and she seemed amazing and all these kind of things. And it was like, okay, but we're still kind of on the fence. She brought in her fiance and we went, if that's her fiance, he is like the coolest guy.
Wow.
She's a total hire. Like we want her on our team because they are special, right? And so all of a sudden we had a real moment with this couple about who they've chosen to be their life partner, to be their husband and wife. And you're like, dude, you're totally incredible. And now I get to see you at all our Christmas parties and stuff, right?
Right.
So
then, I love that. I seriously do. So then when people end up coming on board, do you feel like there's not a lot of surprises? You feel like, okay, what I just saw on this 4-step process, especially with the couples or the significant other, sealing the deal.
Yeah.
I imagine that the odds of you not getting thrown a curveball where you're like, how did I hire that? This is the worst fit. The odds probably swing in your favor, like significantly.
I think they do. But as you know, man, it's business is just challenging, you know? Like the best part of business is the people. And the worst part of business is the people, right? And I mean employees, you know? And so, but that's it. And so I then look at it on the other side of it and I go, it's a stewardship opportunity.
Right.
So this person's now on my team. And so on Monday, every Monday, we do a book club. And so we actually go through some sort of, whether it's a business book or whether it's some sort of something about your character. And I always like to go through that book when we do this as a team and we say, man, my goal is that you become a better mom, sister, brother, husband. And through doing that, you're going to become a better employee. That's just going to be the byproduct.
Right.
But I want you to see that I actually care about you as a person, being on my team. And so that you see the investment I have in you as a person and your character, you're going to also start to go, man, this is a different place.
Right.
People care about me on a different level. And you're like, you're right. We totally do, you know? And then we have what we call employee development meetings that we do once a quarter. And then we basically take our vision and values and we do a Q&A to figure out, how are you doing on living up to that vision and values that you said in the beginning?
Right.
So that's our hope.
I'm going to get DMs, I already know. I'm going to get DMs. Can you connect me with Chad? I want to go work for this company. First, I'm like listening, going, dang, I love that, man.
Yeah.
So, okay. You spend a lot of time making sure it's a good fit.
Yeah.
Right? And then you just said something that I think is really interesting, that you take a stewardship role or a leadership role and try to build people up.
That's right.
How does it look when something's not a good fit? When you just have somebody in the team that you just is not here for it, you know it's not working. How does that process look?
Well, that's I would say probably is in a lot of ways our weakest element, and it's because of our culture.
Right.
It's because there's a lot of grace given, and in a lot of times that's a really good thing because we all need a lot of grace.
Right.
I ain't perfect. I'm a mess, right? I need all the help I can get. I need all the patience I can get. And so I think Carly feels a lot of that and goes, man, a lot of people have given me second chances. I want to give people a lot of second chances.
Right.
And so, but we have had moments in the past where we go, okay, this is actually something that, and it teeter-totters over when we go, that's actually going to hurt the business.
Right.
That's actually going to hurt somebody else that's on the team. And so that person no longer belongs here because they're going to do damage. I have to protect this team. I have other people that I'm a steward of, so I have to protect them. Right. So this element is not working any longer to continue to build this vision that we've all signed on to. And so I have to figure out how to help them to another place to go be somewhere else.
Okay. It's because I was always taught that you hire slow and fire fast. That was kind of what I grew up being taught.
Yeah.
And there is a balance. It's so interesting, right? Like you don't want to just let people go the second they make a mistake because where you said it, and I totally agree. We're all making mistakes, right? Like Ray Dalio talked about this, and you ever read his book Principles?
Yeah,
it's phenomenal, right? I took so much away from that book. That basically you don't want to. If somebody makes a mistake and they're being punished, what you're doing is you're creating a culture where everyone's scared to try anything. Or when they make a mistake, they try to cover it up, right? And then when you look at the total business organization, what happens is the business doesn't move forward anymore,
That's
right? So he lives by this principle of basically being, radically transparent And when you make a mistake, throw it out there so everyone knows,
Right.
and then you figure out how to fix it, and then you move on, right? And I think there's a lot of value in that. I guess the question I'm going to ask you, because I mean, this is something that we, as my business, we talk about often. Where is that line where, you have people that become part of a culture and it feels like they're part of the family?
Yes.
And then you're looking at in some people, making mistakes that can be catastrophic to your business.
That's right.
And really you having to look at the total group and, what is best for us and et cetera, et cetera. Where do you get there? Where is that line for you? Is it just, look, if I see something that's catastrophic, okay, they're out. If it's something that isn't great for the business, but it's not catastrophic, I have a lot of grace and we'll work with them for the next 3, 6, 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. And I think Carly and I see this sometimes a little bit differently, and that's probably the challenge. Because
my partners and I do too. I think that's probably normal.
And I think that's it. I think it's that she often is like, let's have grace, and I'm more of a let's fire fast.
Right.
And so sometimes she's right, and sometimes I'm right.
Right.
And so I find that these things have a way of finding just a settling point where, honestly, those things usually end up showing themselves to be true, that you go, yeah, that person quit.
Right.
Because they started feeling that they didn't fit in this culture anymore.
Right.
And so that's the hope, is that you've built a culture that's strong enough that ultimately somebody goes, this isn't working for me anymore.
Right.
Right. So that's I think where we currently are. And honestly, I believe this is something that we can grow and evolve in.
Right.
And I think if I didn't have to say that, number one, I wouldn't be being honest.
Right.
And number two, I also wouldn't realize there's any place for my business or us to grow.
Right.
There's so much room to grow.
Right.
Always. Right. I mean, we're going to be in this for the long haul.
That's right.
You know?
The podcast I did before this, Michael and I talking about the challenges we have with the business the last 2 weeks. Like, it's just how it is.
Right.
And you know what? I would say there's a lot of crossover there for our business. Like, one of my partners it sounds more like Carly.
Yeah.
In the sense of, like, when we see something, it's usually me that's going, this isn't working.
Let's
like,
move on.
it's better for them. It's better for us. Like, let's not, keep somebody in a position where they're not able to succeed. So I usually get to the point of, let's go.
Right.
And he is usually, no, I want to work with them. Let's give it time. And then I think we end up, meeting at probably a healthy balance.
Right.
But do we talk about it all the time?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'm like, no, we have to do this. And
Right.
I think there's times where I was right, and we should have just clipped it right away.
Yep.
And then honestly, I think there's times where he was right, where I was like, dang, you know what? Thank you.
I agree.
And so, I agree with you.
Yeah,
we're,
and I
we're
think,
constantly trying to figure that out.
like, even
also.
this week, we were working on our modifying our EDMs, our employee development meetings. And I saw it come through the email, and I looked at it, and there was 4 things that we were adding on there. And one was attendance and punctuality. And so I called our head of HR, and I said, hey, why is that on there? And I said, is there somebody that this is for? Yeah, well, there's somebody that's kind of showed up late. And I was like, okay, I don't think this should go on EDMs. I think we need to go have a conversation with that person and go, attendance and punctuality, that's like baseline, right? If you're not showing up or you're late, like, we'll talk about it 2 or 3 times, but you got to go.
Yeah.
That's baseline, right?
Yeah.
That's like, I'm 16 and working it in and out, and I just figured out if I'm late, I'm fired. You know what I mean? So I was like, I don't think that goes on the employee development meetings. This is just like baseline employee stuff.
Yep.
And it was like, oh, that's clarifying, right?
Right.
So I think there's some things like that where it's like, no, we need to go sit down and just have like a harder conversation with somebody and go, hey, listen, I love you, I believe in you, but like, this is what you got to do. Like, this is what it means to be a grown-up. This is what it means to be an employee. This is what it means to like step up and have a real job.
Yeah.
You know?
This is addition and subtraction. We're at the ground level.
That's it. Yeah. And then I think on the bigger level, I think there's also things where it's talking about how to develop and care for somebody. We had another situation this week where we found out that somebody hadn't been communicating about an issue that they had been having with another employee. So I was like, okay, hold on. We've got something in our culture, first off, that's not allowing you, like that Ray Dalio conversation, where you feel the freedom to come and just tell us the truth.
Right.
I want to know the truth because, number one, I need to help you, and I want to go help that person, and I want to figure out how to navigate that. Somebody may need to just change or grow, or somebody may need to go.
Right.
So we need to work through that.
That's good. That's a
Yeah.
big one for our company. We try, if there's a if there's an issue that's starting to brew,
Yeah.
we really encourage. I mean, whether it's team, have us partners as well.
Yeah.
Get it out there as fast as possible.
That's right.
Because
Let's
when
talk
you
about
don't, it's only getting bigger and bigger, and your odds of resolving it go down.
Right.
And then you're talking about something that could really impact what I think could be significant opportunity. So that's a big
and you
one
may
for us.
lose a great employee.
Yeah, that's
because they no longer love their job, and you're like, wait, what?
Right.
You didn't allow me to help you love your job better by helping you realize if you would have communicated that, I would have solved that for you.
Right.
I would have helped you with that.
Right.
Whether it's how to communicate about that for the future or how to deal with this issue that's going on in your life or in the business. And like, I don't want you to show up. In the early days, that's what we used to ask in our first EDMs was, what do you love about your job and what do you not love about your job? And we would do everything we could do to get the things that they didn't love about their job off their plate. Like super simple. I just want you to love coming to work. That's my goal. And if you love what you love what you get to do, man, you're going to love coming and being a part of this culture, building it, growing it. It's going to be healthy for you, so it's going to be healthy for us. And we all get to be a blessing to each other.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, switching to balance, right? 'Cause we're in a similar life cycle. Both married, multiple kids, multiple businesses. How important is work-life balance for you? And what are some of the things that are working?
Yeah, I heard somebody say, I used to really like that term, and then I heard somebody say that's actually not real, that work-life balance is not real.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, that kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I was like, it's actually kind of true because there's seasons of time where you go, dude, I'm grinding. Right? Whether it's like the business is like in our face. We have an issue that just happened and we got to fix it and we got to navigate it. Otherwise, this thing's going to sail away, right? So we have to be all hands on deck. We are focused. Now, I don't get the opportunity to go like, so who's got my kids? You know, like I can't just like bail. I still have to have responsibilities. So I have to have a priority structure of understanding that that's there. To me, that's a given, right? So my priorities have to be in order first. How am I caring for my family? How am I caring for my relationship in my walk with the Lord, right, with God? And then how am I caring for my kids? How am I caring for all these different areas in business? And if one lights up, okay, maybe I've got an issue that's going on with my kids. Well, that's the most important thing right now. So I need to spend a little bit more time. So we might need to carve out of things for the business. And honestly, this may be a season where the business isn't as successful.
Yeah.
But you know what? I can't lose my family. That's the most important thing.
Right.
So Bible says, what does it profit a man if he gain the world and he lose his soul?
Right.
Whew. I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't want to lose my soul. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to lose my marriage. That's the most important thing. So I have to always navigate through whatever that looks like and make sure that those priorities are in order and those things are showing up in my schedule.
Right.
And so then whenever, I'm able to then pull back, which I think you have to carve out time to be able to pull back and look, as I like to say, from a 50,000 foot level, look down on your life, look down on your business and structure that you have of your time and your schedule and say, okay, is this what I want it to say? When I look back at the end of my life and I look back, am I going to either have regrets or am I going to look back and go, that was the life that I wanted? And I'm thankful that I got to be the steward of this life that I was given. And it was a blessing, man. I got to be a part of that. That's insane, right? But I have to be the one that actively works that out. Right. And yet also I have to understand sometimes that it's not in my control. So I have to hold my hands open. I have to control as much as I can, but also know that I'm not in control.
Right.
God's ultimately in control, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I have to navigate through it.
That's right. That's good. I was with Paul Rodriguez, I was telling you about earlier.
Yeah.
Last week, and we were doing an interview, and I kind of just asked him about money.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's somebody who he likes nice cars, right? Jewelry, like he's a little bit more flashy. And I kind of just said, like, look, you like these things, but I've never seen you worship these things. Like, talk about like your desire to accomplish, but where you find that balance of love of money. And he said basically the same thing. He's like, well, I don't want to lose my soul. My soul's the thing that's most important. And all this other stuff is just not worth that, right?
That's right.
So in these times where maybe the business is more demanding, because I totally agree with you. Like the truth is there are times where you are not even close to in balance. Like I'm in one of these seasons right now.
Yeah.
I am very heavily weighted on business right now, right? And in that, I have to do different things to maintain a good relationship with my wife and, making sure I'm still being a good dad and present with my kids.
Right.
What are some of the things you do when it's off-weighted? Like, do you have it so, like, if this is a season of freaking, we're going head down in business, do I have a mandatory weekly date with Carly? Do I have, things set up with the kids? Like, where do you find opportunity to make sure you're nurturing the relationship in those moments of not even close to balance?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I think oftentimes you have red flags, right? I think when you're in the jam season, red flags pop up. Right. And those red flags often tell you like, hey, something's wrong. This is off a little bit. And so then it might cause you to take a moment and go, hold on, I need to take pause, right? I also have men that have been in my life, mentors, that I've sat down with in numbers of seasons of my life, really since the very beginning of our business, really as a young man, even where I would go, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not missing things in my life because I have blinders on, right? I'm like laser focused in on what I'm trying to accomplish. Like everyone get out of my way. I'm going after something. But sometimes you have somebody that comes along and goes, hey, I was there like 20 years ago. That's going to hurt. The end of that path is going to hurt. And you don't want to keep going down that road. And I think that's been a huge gift, is having mentors in my life that'll help me, whether it's either in business to go, hey, here's a better path, and finding somebody that's super successful, whether that's through books, whether that's through podcasts or interviews or YouTube videos or series like that, or actual mentors. If you can get in front of somebody that's willing to give you their time, that you can learn from and glean wisdom from, of somebody that's done it before you. That's on the business side. But man, even more so in parenting and in marriage, to have somebody that's willing to walk through that with you and say, yeah, you're going to want to work on this. You're going to need to carve out a date night. You're going to need to carve out some more time with your kids. Right. And I think a big one is my wife. She's the biggest red flag, right? How is she doing? And what is her perspective on how I'm doing? Right. And having those conversations. Sometimes those aren't fun conversations to have. Sometimes you ask that question and you don't like the answer because you're like, oh, I think you just told me I failed everything, right? And I've had those. And so it just gives you something to say, man, if her perspective on me is that I'm failing, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's all got to change.
Right.
So that's, I think, it. And then once you kind of get out of that season of kind of crazy, it's carving out that time. It's making, whether it's, I think in the early years, I used to get up early on a Monday morning and I would go to a Starbucks that was across the street and I would just sit there with my priorities in line. I would make sure that my day was carved out according to my priorities for like an hour and a half. And I would show back up before everybody was awake. And I was like, those are my priorities, and that's going to fill in my day, and that's going to fill in my week. So you have to stop and make sure that this life that you desire is showing up in your schedule. So you have to design a life and a vision for what you want, and then that has to show up in your schedule. So recently I just did a kind of an assessment where I took my schedule and I did time blocking. Yeah. And I was like, let's write down exactly what I want my days to look like, all the way from when I wake up in the morning to when I go to bed, what I want my last thought and actions to be of the day, and what I want in the very beginning of the day. And I found blocks of time. And dude, it was the biggest spanking. I was like, dude, you've got like a carved out block of time every day that you kind of intentionally put there to do work. You're not doing the work. You're filling it with nonsense, right?
Yep.
And so that was a spanking from me because I put it on paper and looked at it and said, oh, I got some work to do.
Yeah. Time blocking is something I'd recommend for everybody. Same thing happens to me when I do it. Are you guys still doing the men's line, or is CGLA women, all women still?
No, it's a little bit of both. And so honestly, we just kind of came out the gate with a really awesome and fun men's line. And now we're just kind of going, the women's line is just, it's what everybody loves. Right. And I think we had a great reception in the beginning, but now we're just kind of going like, okay, what are the priorities? It's talking about time. Like, right. What do you have time for? What do you have bandwidth for? And I feel like it was just a team decision at this moment to go like, hey, it can still exist and it can still navigate in, a potential reality. But like for now, we're just focusing on the women's line.
Okay. So boys, check out the line. But if you have a girlfriend,
This
if
is
you
1906,
are
by the way.
married, boom, here we go.
This is
and
the
I
guy's
complimented
line,
you. I'm
right?
like, dang, you dressed today, man.
Hey,
Dang, this was not the day to go light. But seriously, my wife loves the brand. My wife brings everybody to the events you guys do. So women and men, check out cgla.com.
CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com.
And then 1969.
1906collective.com.
1906collective.com. Thank you for doing this. This was amazing. I hope everybody got a ton of value out of this. I sure did. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week.